give us a nice sort of easy background to look at. There we go. All right. Welcome to everyone who has just joined. If you're still having problems seeing the presentation, send me a chat or unmute your mic and talk now, or forever hold your peace. All right, looks like most of us have got it. All right, so I have my trusty psychoed here. Again, it's divided into processing sections. Let's visually take a look at this kid. And you may, if you've got a small screen, this might be a little bit hard to see, but in lieu of a whiteboard, it's the best we can do. Okay. So we're going to talk about, and we're going to try to make sure our pen works. All right. Apple, you've got to cooperate with me. There we go. Okay. All right, the first thing we do is we put up the student's name. Of course, this is Johnny. Okay. Now I want to take a look at Johnny's visual processing. So I'm going to bring a line over here. Visual process. Okay. Now I know on the VMI, he scored an 83. On the matrix, he scored a 90. Block design, got an 80. And verbal spatial, and remember, these are all subtests except for the VMI. So if you remember my approach, you know that the matrix comes from the CAS. The block design is from the WISC 5. The verbal spatial is from the CAS. So I'm using subtests from the different assessments that I've given Johnny that all deal with visual processing. Now, if we take a look, we can see that matrix is 90. That's good. That's average. Verbal spatial is 95. That's average. That's definitely average there. Not even low average. But when we look at the VMI, it's 83, and the block design is 80. So what is that telling us just with this much information on the screen? Well, don't answer that question. It's rhetorical. I'll answer it for you. The first thing you should notice is that these two subtests require fine motor skills. Okay. The VMI, you've got to actually use the pencil to draw with, and the block design, you've got to manipulate little blocks. All right. So we might have a visual process. We might have a fine motor issue. It looks like visual processing without fine motor skills is fine, but add in the fine motor skills, and you've got a little bit of an issue. Okay. Let's take a look now at memory. So we're going to do the same thing for the memory block. We've got word memory, 93. We've got phonological memory, at 95. We've got a couple of assessments on the RAML. Visual memory came in at 101, and I'm sorry, not auditory, but verbal came in at 120. Okay, what's significant here, without a doubt, is that 120. His verbal skills are obviously way better. That's his strength. That's just his strength. And if we take a look here, we notice that his highest visual processing correlates to the visual processing subtest that used verbal. So verbal. So we know this student has verbal processing strength. Right? We can tell that right away. Let's take a look at attention processing. Oh, I'm supposed to be drawing little lines here. There we go. This one gets interesting. On the brief, we see that the attention score is at 80. Let me back up though, because I need to specify. This is brief parent. Brief teacher. Remember, the brief is the behavior rating inventory of executive functioning. It has an attention scale on it. Look at that. The teacher rates them much better than the parent does. What about the cons?
Is that an 80 or an 88?
That's an 80, thank you. Let me correct that. The Connors parent came in at a 70, and the Connors teacher, and remember, I take all these T-scores and convert them to standard scores. So you are looking at standard scores here. 95. So we've got some really good attention scores at school and significant difference at home. One of the things that you can pick up on here, you can do one of two things with this information. You can either assume the parent is not telling the truth, which I never do. There's a reason the parent scored this student so low. So let's assume all these scores are correct. Let's assume that his ability to pay attention at home is significantly different than at school. We know that's not consistent with ADHD. It's not even consistent with an attention processing issue. But it is consistent with an executive functioning deficit. Executive functioning students often respond well to the structure they have at school. So I'm going to just make a note right here that this equals an executive functioning deficit. It tends to demonstrate a need for structure. Now, if you tell that to a parent, the first thing a parent might do is say, well, at home, he's structured. He has to do his homework. We have routines. Always sort of preempt this by saying that the school is more structured than the typical home, as it should be. At home, students need more flexibility. Children need more flexibility, less rules, less rigidity to thrive. And at school, it's exactly the opposite. All right, let's take a look at auditory processing. See if that's going to point out anything to us. I'm just going to bring that down here. Again, we know the word memory came in at 93. Phonological processing came in at 95. Letter number from the WISC came in at 80. Number forward comes in at 95, and number reverse comes in at 85. Okay. So we've got a couple of low scores here that kind of stand out. Otherwise, we've got some good attention processing. So did we just ignore those low scores? Well, let's take a look at them. Hey, good. Yeah, Lorraine, you're absolutely right. We could be looking at a working memory, absolutely, because the letter number requires us to have both numerical and alphabetical knowledge and to bring that into short-term memory. And number reversal, though, just requires us to hold all those numbers and put them, say them backwards. So, Lorraine, you're absolutely right. But the other thing we know about these two scores is that they are highly cognitively loaded. Okay, just a second. Okay, good. I'm getting toward the bottom of the screen. Hopefully you can still see this. Let me just pull it up for a second. Okay. So, number forward, phonological memory and word memory, those are the most simplest of tasks. All you have to do is repeat either a list of words. On the phonological memory test, you repeat a list of numbers, and then you also repeat made-up words. On letter number, you've got the working memory. It's harder cognitively, so we call that a higher cognitive load. And if we take a look, I don't want to take a look quite yet. Okay, let's do one more section. Let's throw in here academics, some of the academic scores. Spelling, (90). Sentence fluency, spelling sentence would help. Dang, I still didn't get it. Race, slow down. (85), math. (75), letter word identification. 89, reading comp. 88. So we're okay. Letter word and spelling. I mean, his academics are low across the board, but those are two of his strengths. We've got some weaknesses going on here in the fluency section. And I don't know what I'm going to call the reading comprehension yet. I want to take a look at a couple of things. So typically, when I see fluency scores that are low, like these are, I'm thinking homework. Because fluency is our ability to think quickly, to demonstrate automaticity, which comes about with practice. If we're not doing our homework, we're not getting enough practice, just like your basketball players on the court. And that's all that homework should be considered, is practice. Sorry about the screen rotating there. That was. However, I think we could be looking here at another sign of the executive functioning deficit. Because if I have poor executive functioning skills, I'm not going to be able to complete my homework, or the homework's going to be a lot more difficult. So we could have an indication here of executive functioning. I want to come back up here to the visual processing, and I want to consider for a moment that the VMI and the block design required that fine motor control. It pushed down the scores whenever we asked him to incorporate hand motion, whether it was writing or manipulating blocks. So I think those two should be an indicator to us of a possible fine motor weakness. Yes, very good. I'm going to go for now with a fine motor weakness. Lorraine mentioned dysgraphia. Very possible. To look at that dysgraphia, let's come here to the sentence fluency and the writing fluency and every sample of handwriting we have on the Woodcock-Johnson, and let's take a look at his handwriting. Okay. So I'm going to put myself a reminder down here. We can definitely review his handwriting. I guarantee you what we're going to see in his handwriting are some lack of automaticity because of these low fluency scores. So what do I mean by automaticity? We're probably going to see handwriting that's missing capital letters at the start of the sentence, probably missing end of the sentence punctuation, spelled something like that. Maybe incorrect spacing between words. All this would indicate that the student has not achieved automaticity in writing because they're not writing enough because of the lack of homework. But we also have two good indicators here that we're looking at a fine motor weakness. We've got a strength in verbal, and we've got a significant drop-off in processing with higher cognitive load. In fact, the higher cognitive load also supports the idea of possible executive functioning deficit. If I cannot maintain my attention and my focus and my behavior, I can't take on a higher cognitive load. So with just this information that you can see on the screen, I think we ought to recommend to the team an OT assessment for fine motor issues, an executive functioning delay represented by the significant drop-off in higher cognitive load, the lack of fluency, the lack of automaticity. And I think I would go with an OHI qualification under limited attention due to executive functioning delay. So this would be my summary. And I'm going to write up my impact statement. So if you remember, well, you might not remember, but colleges should be doing an impact statement education. Do you guys see the word impact statement? I don't see it on my screen yet.
It looks frozen. I don't see it.
Okay. Hang on just a second. Let me stop the broadcast and come back to it.
I see it now. Oh, but I see it now.
All right.
I don't
excellent.
know if anyone.
It just wanted a little attention. Okay. Would be something along of Johnny's academic performance, academic ability, significantly impacted by less than expected executive functioning, limiting, no, I don't want to say limiting, I want to say causing, I don't want to word this, we can say requiring additional support and time for higher cognitively loaded assessments. No, assignments. Something, so on and so forth. And I probably wouldn't use the word actually higher cognitively loaded. I would have to rephrase that in a way that the teachers would understand that this is a more abstract sort of thinking, more sort of on the fly, quick responses, that would limit him. So questions, thoughts on this visual presentation? What do you think? I like the fact that Lorraine came up with a couple of oops, sorry, was taking my some of those processes a little bit differently than I had taken them, like the dysgraphia. That was a great catch there. You know, the memory issue, the memory is so good that it kind of makes me wonder, question this executive functioning. So that puts a big question mark right here. Because normally, memory is not that good with executive functioning. You see an impact. So we've got a couple options. We could rule out, or we could see executive functioning, more specifically weak towards attention. I think if I was going to do more testing, yeah, very good. If I was going to do more testing, I think I would want to do the CPT2, which we talked about. That's a computer-based assessment that is very good at picking up signs of attention deficit. Then again, we did talk about this really probably is an attention deficit because we're not seeing attention deficit issues at school. So we are looking at executive functioning, and Lorraine is probably right. The memory processing is compensating for the executive functioning. That would make sense, Lorraine. He would have to realize he's got to get it the first time. He's got to utilize his strength, memory, and verbal processing because he's not going to practice it at home, and he's not going to have time to contemplate on it. We will really see this impact Johnny in algebra and beyond in math. Once it goes beyond algebra and you've really got to concentrate on it and wrap your mind around it, at least for me. I mean, that's the way I understood math, was to really contemplate it for a while until I could get my mind around why the formula worked. So Johnny might not have that luxury. He's just going to have to learn the formulas and move on. Learn the formulas and move on. I think for a recommendation, I'm going to recommend that we insist that he gets all of his homework done. In fact, I'm borderline recommending he gets extra homework, but that probably wouldn't help things at home. What do you think about counseling for this kid? There are some counseling techniques to help with executive functioning. In fact, in the report template I sent you in the recommendation section, there's a whole bunch of executive functioning interventions that come straight from the brief software. So, does anybody see anything else that jumps out at them? Yes, good one, Lorraine. A graphic organizer for note-taking and for writing. Excellent idea. Excellent. Dennis pointed out a while ago that with this model, it's real easy to see the students' strengths and their weaknesses. And that way you're not just focusing on their weaknesses when you're presenting your report, which is a habit we get into. Now, I'm not looking at dyslexia here because of the phonological processing scores, the auditory strength, the spelling. Reading comprehension is at 88. Is there a picture? Okay, reading comprehension is at 88. I'm going to attribute that at this point to executive functioning, and that's not significantly low to give us any indication of true dyslexia. Now, that would be a good topic, though, for another presentation later on, is how to assess for dyslexia. And it is really easier than most school psychologists realized. And it is definitely something that, an area that not only do we want to assess in, but we have to assess in, especially in California. It's really not, it really doesn't involve giving a whole lot of extra assessments. So Dennis pointed out, or asked the question, do I have a picture of the student's pencil grip? That's an excellent question. So typically, as Dennis will tell you, when I do an assessment, there will be a picture of the student's pencil grip. And I usually take it while they're doing the VMI. Probably, at least 8 times out of 10, if not more often, they're holding the pencil incorrectly. No, Dennis, I don't think I have a picture of a pencil grip, but that would be a good thing to get a hold of too. Although I would want to know that because we want to correct pencil grip as soon as we can. By the way, team at OT will tell you that it doesn't do any good to try to change the pencil grip after about 3rd or 4th grade. I'm going to call that BS right now, and I have the greatest respect for OTs. I think they're some of the smartest people in the world. But I know I've changed my own pencil grip. I've even changed my writing style. I changed it when I turned 30, and then again just recently. As you can tell, it's much more readable now. No, it's impossible to write on these iPad screens. But I did correct my pencil grip and my writing style years, 30 and beyond, so it is doable. Other thoughts? Now, we could have thrown cognitive up here, and you notice we didn't. I hate that keeps rotating. Sorry about that. Just for your knowledge, cognitive full scale came in at, let me look here, 98. So we don't have any concerns there. And as you know, I don't really like to use full scale, but I don't want to break it down right now. Oh, hey, what does that link look like? Nice. Thank you. Does it show what a a great pencil grip looks like? Functional. Okay. Oops. Dang it. Well, I'm now in Pinterest. Sorry, I went someplace. All right. Anyway. Okay. It would, in some of my reports, I actually show what a correct pencil grip looks like. Can the parent surveys correlate with the math fluency score? Math. Good question, Dennis. Think about this for a minute. No, math and sentence require fine motor skills. Math is lower. Johnny might find math to be a higher cognitive load. So I'm going to connect it with a dotted line because I'm not sure there's a connection there. But I wouldn't be surprised. We definitely speak more in sentences than we write in math. So that's a really good question. And if the math fluency is lower because it's a higher cognitive load for Johnny, then that also means that it's being affected by the executive functioning delay, which we think is probably affecting the higher cognitive load manifestation. Excellent question. Very good. Okay. Done on a whiteboard, what I would typically do is have 3 pins. Okay. So on a whiteboard, this block design at 80 right here would look like this. I would take my red marker and I would put block design. Because I wouldn't have the ability to highlight on the whiteboard. So I would make all my low scores in red, all my high scores in green, and my lines in blue or black. Whatever method works for you, but I find taking the extra few minutes and having 4 pins open and ready to go, that when the color finally comes out, it's really easy to see the reds. It's really easy to see the greens that you've written the good scores in. The blue lines kind of fade into the background, or actually the black lines. You probably make most of these lines black that are now blue. And then you would use your blue lines to make your connections with. Whatever color works for you, but take the time to use the color.